too bad. If you are all ready, then we will begin. So, the first story for tonight is called Old Soul, written by L. Madison. Yep. Hold on one moment. There we go. All right. Can you hear me? I remember being reborn 1,000 times. In the between times, the very start and end of a life, the memories are strong. I remember the warmth of the sun on my crumpled wings as they unfold for one brilliant, bright day of flight. I relive the elation of the chase and the sinking of my teeth into the throat of my prey. What a joy! It is to satisfy my physical hunger. I recall the agony of being prey, because, of course, all things must balance out in the end. My heart has pumped cold blood through its sinuous coils and thumped its warm-blooded rhythm from the ocean depths. Like you, I am the sum of a million experiences. It's true that the messy, bloody rebirth into the world as a human stuns me every time. The shock of union as soul rejoins body. The violent expulsion through the birth canal. The startling sensation of air on skin after an age of ethereal floating. The instinctive gasp, that first mortal wail, and so it begins again. And I'm here at the start of a new life. You and I are not here together by chance. Karma pulls souls with the persistence of a river to the place they belong. For those not yet enriched enough by suffering, well, fate always finds a way to make things fair. I've lived my share of troubled lives, and I've mostly learned how to transcend them by serving my purpose with patience and compassion. Karma is as undeniable as gravity, and we must exist in harmony with it. This is how the warp and weft of the universe is woven. When it is time to begin again, I was drawn to my mother over all others. What a pattern has been set out for us, I can't say yet. As she grew the miraculous mass of stardust and water that became my body, I surrounded her with my energy until she shone. Then I sunk, as sure as an anchor, dropping into the tiny infant form that will now grow and carry me through this life. I'm only a few days old, and I'm waiting to be both teacher and learner. I'm eager to meet the other embodied souls whose lives are entwined with mine. One moment. I sleep a lot. I dream of the colored currents of bliss in the supernatural soup from which we come. I wake, and the ancient sensation of hunger drives my little body into a rage. I'm not yet skilled in exercising the intricate pathways of my brain, and I squirm and grunt with frustration. My body feels cumbersome. Those early days are both familiar and vexing, as I remember the restrictions and the pleasures of flesh. My new senses thrill at the smell and the sound of my mother as she comforts me, and my immature eyes learn to focus on her face. I wonder at the journey she is taking and the role I will play. Soon all the memories from before will fade, and I'll be fully immersed in the point of time and space my body occupies. I'll only know the world around me through my mortal senses. I'll forget how the sunlight felt on my wings, and will long only for the warmth of my mother's body. The desire to satisfy hunger will only bring memories of milk, not blood. It will take time to relearn the workings of the natural world. I'll have a simple, finite sense of self. I'll no longer know where body becomes soul, and where soul becomes eternity. Echoes of past lives will emerge, as they always do. Brutal urges to survive at the expense of others, perhaps. Humanity can be as ugly as it is sublime. We've all expressed violence and selfishness, especially in early lives. I'll have no notion of where these forces come from, but I'll be measured by how I channel them. I wonder if the wisdom I've gained will persist strongly enough in my subconscious to prevail. But for now, having just arrived, still settling into this soft seed case of flesh, I remember everything. I am wiser than my parents could ever comprehend, yet helpless to communicate a word with them. My parents have placed me in your arms, excited to introduce us. They are anxious to check that the crook of your fragile elbow is supporting my head. Your embrace is stiff and awkward, but it accommodates my weight. He is such an easy baby, my mother tells you. We're naming him after you, Dad, my father says. Who do you think he takes after? You peer into my face, pull a doubtful expression. Well, I don't know, you begin. We gaze at each other, mutually intrigued, and as my parents are struck by how we appear simultaneously serious and serene, they marvel at the beauty of the very old cradling the very young. We are alike, you and I. We have in common the love of my parents, and we hold a symmetry in being at two opposing ends of life, bookends with a library of experience between us. You lift a sinewed hand and stroke the curve of my cheek. I see how you're coming to the end of your journey. Your body has become a husk, ready to release you back to the universe. You are starting to remember the unseen ocean of energy that surrounds us. I can sense your longing to return to it, your desire to be free again. The years went by so quickly, you think, as you almost remember eternity and understand that your brief time is no more than a blink of an eye. But you're still so strongly tethered to this life. The jangling currents of pain in your aged nerves serve as kite strings, constantly bringing you back to your body. The unfulfilled wishes and wants of the years weigh heavily in you. You are afraid, because you can't yet see anything beyond. It makes you bewildered and resistant. You're stuck. This will be my first purpose then, to help you remember what happens next, to reassure you that you can let go as soon as you're ready. I'm here now, and I'll comfort my mother and father when you're gone. Can you hear me? I don't know who he takes after, you say, but I see an old soul behind those eyes. That is Old Soul by L. Morrison. We will take a moment so I can get something to drink, and then we will continue on to the next story. That does sound like a fun experience. All right. The next story is a little more uh, positive, I would say. Oh, then please get some rest. Pleasure to meet you, sir. All right. Shall we continue on to the next one? Weirdo wants cheeseburgers. Fair enough. All right. If you're all ready, we'll move on. Wait, Tony's coming in. Come on, Tony. You missed the first story, but I do have two lined up, so we have another one for you. And I am recording it, so you can catch the first one later if you'd like. All right. The next story is called No Longer Forgotten, written by Meredith McKee. Let me just get this in the spot. All right. Looking out over the lake, she sighed. Another day in the endless stretch of eternity dawning. A thin beam of light danced across the water as the breath of her sister rippled on the surface. It was a greeting, equivalent to a soft smile from across a crowded room. High above, leaves rustled and the branches creaked. An echoed hello of her beloved brother, tousling her hair playfully. In time, as her father rose across the sky, he would greet her with a silent warmth, just as he would all of his children, all of the gods and goddesses across these lands. She knew that he loved them all equally, but in her solitude here, it was hard to avoid the deep cut of sorrow that settled within her as the moment passed. All the while she lay there, fading. Much like many of her siblings before, eternity would end. As a child, all of the divine ones were taught the rules. As long as mortals thought of them, they would live. That is why her mother hung in the sky, shining pale light on young lovers brought together by the machinations of her sisters and their children. It is why her father's brother still toiled tirelessly over every field and plain that brought forth the fruits of the earth, for his wife to transform from bountiful harvests into delicious feasts. It did not matter that their names changed, for her parents and eldest siblings, they grew accustomed to being called many different things across the entirety of the world as languages pulled and changed from place to place. It did not matter, because regardless of what they were called, they were seen and lived in the minds of those below. Not all things kept names, though, like her sister Wind and her brother Tree. With no one to call upon her, to think of her, to remember her, what good was a name? She was fading. They knew it, too, which is why they lingered here with her. All that she once knew captured in this hidden place. However long ago it had been, the earth shook. There was no reason for the fight, and to this day she did not know who caused it or even who won. All she knew is that everything she had known, loved, cared for, and existed had fallen deep below. It had opened a wound that could not heal, a scar that was now healing after centuries and slowly killing her. The beam of her father's light passed beyond her view, the only remnants of his light lingering at the surface of the slowly sealing crack. Soon she would lose sight of him, forever. It was only a matter of time. Eternity did not last forever. Each step took more effort than the last. As she padded barefoot across the stone and moss, a few droplets from the dripstone touched her hair and her cheek. Soft kisses from water, her closest friend. The one who had stayed with her the longest, sharing in the task and toil that kept her here in her fragility. It's not right. There was a soft pool of water that sat at her charge, the purpose for her existence, and the last few of their kind, floating golden flowers, crawling on silver vines across the surface of the water and out to the cracks of the rocks, and the shattered marble remains of her shrine. Oh, how she wished she knew their name. Through the lessons she had been taught, she said she would only remain as long as someone remembered her charge. She could not help but wonder, was she still here at all, simply seeking the flowers out each day? It had been centuries, easily, since she had been trapped down here. No longer were garlands shaped for the crown of princes or for adorning tables during the festivals. No longer were they woven into bridal braids or pressed into perfumes. Instead, they remained here with her, wilting, the last of their kind. Her eyes glanced to the depths of the cave, the silent but ever watchful darkness deep within. Darkness, she knew, was the oldest of them all, never speaking, never reaching, simply there. If she walked towards him, would he welcome her? They were family, after all. Another drip of water on her cheek served as a warning against such thoughts. No, no, water was right. A goddess did not give up on her charge, no matter how weak and weary she may be. Her time would come when it would. When the last of the mortals forgot her name, it would all end. Continuing about her work, urging the vines up the craggy surface, coaxing them to reach for a few more moments of sunlight, to climb out of these depths, a sound distracted her. It was not the buzz of the bees or the flies that visited her ever so rarely. It was not the groan and stretch of the earth or the call of a bird. It was different. Furrowing her brow, she glanced up at the silver of blue sky and saw a spot of black, like a droplet of ink on perfect silk. It whirred and buzzed as it began to descend into the cavern. As it turned and glanced about, an impish giggle in a language she did not know, but recognized as one of the divine, startled her. The light shone upon her, through her, and to the flowers and vines beneath her. Then upon her shrine. Her chest could have burst with the unfamiliar feeling of life, of memory, of anything for the first time in centuries. It was not the same rush felt at the summer festivals or on the bridal nights, but after the feeling of nothing for so long, it was overwhelming. Salt tears prickled in her eyes as she followed the device, the drone, around its exploration of the cavern before it rose again into the sky. And though she was alone, she was really and truly not forgotten. In her excitement, she called out to her brothers and sisters, and that night they were gusts of rain and falling leaves making their way into the cavern, celebrating with her in the only way they could. Her work began in earnest as she begged, pleaded, and pulled each flower and vine along the walls of the cavern. Please, please. All night and all day she looked to the sky again, waiting for the return of the young one. Another day passed, and by the third she felt as though her tears of despair would drown her. The tiny flame of belief, of memory, was there. They had not forgotten her, and even as she glanced back into the darkness of the cavern, she felt even more determination not to be forgotten. Whether by fate or faith, on the fourth day she heard the familiar chittering laughter, joined by several others, as she watched three long, colorful cords descend into her prison. In her excitement, her feet could not touch the ground, and she floated between the figures. The mortals, dressed not in linens and gold, but in bright, loud clothing, with lights adorning their heads. Once their feet touched the stone ground, the giggling laughter of technology nearly drowned out their word. "You're sure this is the place?" a woman asked, shining a light down, glinting off the wet stone. "I'm not seeing any of the specimen." "They'll be a bit deeper, according to the footage," a man's voice replied, as light and airy as the golden hair peeking from under his helmet. This was the safest spot to drop in. "Be careful as you go down, and watch your step," another man chided, his voice clipped and cheery, but laced with caution. "Try not to step on anything important. If they're anything like the common variety, their root systems are very delicate." "Yes, Professor." The light of the device in his hand nearly blinded her, but after a quick greeting of yet another impish voice, she squinted at the image on the screen. Her eyes grew wide as she saw an image, a painting, no, a mosaic, of her flowers and vines and of her shrine. Tears streamed down her cheeks as her hands came to cover her mouth in disbelief. "This is amazing. Look at the stratification," one of the voices exclaimed, hands dancing down along the lines of the stone. "Dr. Flanagan would be interested in having his team down here too, I imagine. Maybe they could carbon date the exact moment of the event." With that, another small device was brought out and flashed brightly at the wall. Something in that moment shifted, but she could not place it. "Yeah, let's bring the rock nerds in," another one chuckled, shining the light further in. We need to get our hands on the specimen before they come in with their jackhammers and the... Professor, there it is, look. The air stilled, with the crackling of gravel beneath their feet, as the only sound for quite some time before they came to stop, gazing forward at a lake, the vines, and the forgotten shrine. Ah, the professor said, coughing to clear away the emotion that had grown thick in his throat. There she is. Kneeling down, he ever so delicately cupped the underside of a flower, and she leaned into the tender touch that she felt against her cheek. Hello, beautiful. I can't believe we found it, one of them said, in a voice lofty with wonder, as another flash from their phone captured a close-up of the flower. A wide shot of the cavern, and then her shrine. This is going to change everything. Professor, there are some inscriptions here. Look. The three crowded around as she floated before them, completely unseen, but beaming with pride and joy. As she recited the sacred words that crossed all languages, but filled her to the brim with all that is divine. May those who gaze upon this most sacred space set aside all sorrow and be blessed by the sight of the goddess of the golden lily. It was silent a moment, all of them still as the marble around them, until the one with the phone murmured, "The golden lily." After a few taps, his fingers stopped moving, and he looked around the cavern. We should get to it. These things aren't going to propagate themselves. As they set to work, Lily followed them, watching as she gently cradled her children as if they were their own. But she was taken aback by an odd feeling. Sparks seemed to be going off within her chest, blossoming into light one after another. It was overwhelming. Devin! Oh my God, Devin, look! One of the girls squealed, splashing to the water to her companion. It went viral. The professor stilled, narrowed his eyes, looking at them. What went viral? His post. He shared online. Look, it's all anyone can talk about. The older man huffed and grumbled a moment before adding on, make sure you tag me or whatever it is you do on it, so that no one else has the idea to steal it. I didn't tromp 14 hours through the wilderness and weather for some hack to snag the research like last time. They kept on for a while as they worked, but Lily could no longer hear them. Distracted and enthralled by the sensations running through her, belief, interest, love, adoration, they thought of her. She was no longer forgotten. That is No Longer Forgotten, written by Meredith McKee. Let me get this down. I hope you all have enjoyed the few stories I picked out for the evening.